It's time for us to talk about tomato seeds.
Hello again and welcome back to Kim's Cozy Corner. Happy New Year. It is the new year and it is time for us to start thinking about our garden for this upcoming season. In this particular video, we are going to focus on tomato seeds. Which ones should we buy and which ones should we avoid? Now, there are many different types of tomato seeds out there, and it just depends on what your taste is, what you're looking for, what size tomatoes you want, as well as how the plant grows and its growth habit. Now, for me, there are a couple types of tomatoes I like to grow, and last season I grew more than 58 different tomato varieties. Now, I had more tomato varieties than that, but I focused on just over 58. I think I started at 58, but I ended up in the low 60s because I just couldn't make my mind up. And I saw something that looked good and I had to try it. But today I'm going to share with you how some of these tomatoes have grown for me in the past, which ones I'll grow again, and which ones I'll probably let them sit out this upcoming season. And I have seeds from a variety of companies, and so you'll get to see who I'm purchasing my seeds from as well. And you want to get your seed orders in early. That way you don't have to worry about anything being out of stock. So I say let's start with our teeny little bitty baby tomatoes. Now for the small tomatoes, or what I call micro dwarf tomatoes, so these are tomatoes, plants that only get no more than a foot tall, and they stay very small. They're perfect for container gardens. I mean, little bitty windowsill gardens, all of those type things. Hydroponic systems, the little small ones, they will grow very well in there, as well as your GreenStalks. And there are a few that I will be growing this year. I will be growing the Tiny Tim. And so here's a picture of the Tiny Tim. I grew it last year and it did very well. It produced all season long. It even hung on at the end of the season once the frost came. And so Tiny Tim for me is an Old Faithful. Another Old Faithful for me is Orange Hat. And I used all my Orange Hat seeds, y'all. And so I needed to purchase some more. And I'm trying a new seed company this year. So Victory Seeds is the name of the company. I've never tried them before. I'm not sure how their seeds are going to come out, but I have grown Orange Hat before. Honestly, this plant doesn't even get a foot tall. I think my plants were closer to 8 or 9 inches tall. They're orange seeds, and here's some pictures of the Orange Hat. And I thought they were delicious. They had a great taste, and they had loads of tomatoes on there. So that's the Orange Hat. We will also be growing Red Robin. And so all of these next seeds are from Victory Seeds. So we're going to grow the Red Robin. It puts me in the mind of the Tiny Tim from the size of the plant, the size of the fruit, all of those type things. But here's the picture of the Red Robin. So we'll do that one as well. The height of this plant is only 6 to 12 inches, which is, again, perfect for containers. And I tried to grow Red Robin last season, and none of my seeds germinated, and my seeds were kind of old. So that's why I purchased new seeds from Victory Seeds this year for the Red Robin. So wish me luck on the Red Robin. I'm also going to grow Rosie Finch. I got it from Victory Seeds as well. Basically, what I did, I went to Victory Seeds, and anything that was called a micro dwarf, I bought it. Now, I don't know anything about Rosie Finch, just to be honest with you. Don't know anything about it. It says it's 55 days to harvest, and it's supposed to be a micro dwarf tomato. And so we will give it a try for this upcoming season for the first time. We're going to also do Patio Choice Yellow F1. It's from Victory Seeds as well. Patio Choice Yellow. So this is a 65 days to harvest. And this plant, in my mind, is almost out of the range of what I would call a micro dwarf tomato. It can get up to 18 inches. And so that's a little bit on the high end in my mind for a micro dwarf tomato, but we will give it a try. And it's a yellow tomato. And then the last micro dwarf that we will give a try this year is Micro Tom. It's an 85-day to maturity. So that's a long time for a micro tomato. Typically, they come in a lot faster than that. But I figured that will help me extend my overall season. It doesn't say how tall it gets. It just says that it's a compact size. So I've never grown this one before. We will give this one a try as well. And that's all on the micro dwarf tomatoes for me. Those are the only ones we're going to try. If you're interested in getting some of those seeds, I suggest you get them early. Micro dwarf seeds seem to sell out quickly in the growing season. So you want to get in quick on the front end if you're interested in micro dwarf tomatoes. So now let's move into what I call my dwarf tomatoes or bush tomatoes. And so my bush tomatoes usually don't get any taller than like 4 feet. My dwarf tomatoes typically range around the 3 feet, well, 2.5 to 3 foot mark for my dwarf tomatoes. Typically your determinate bush tomatoes put all of their fruit on at one time and then they get done producing for the season. For dwarf tomatoes, you can have determinate, which is put all your fruit on at one time. You can have semi-determinate, so a few fruit all season long, and determinate, where they're constantly pumping out tomatoes all season long. And so my dwarf tomatoes come in all 3 varieties: determinate, semi-determinate, and indeterminate. For my bush tomatoes or my dwarf tomatoes, y'all, I have a pretty big stack of these. Big stack, big stack. Most of my dwarf tomatoes are coming from Tomato Fest, and I have put out several videos out there with my dwarf tomatoes from Tomato Fest. So I will quickly go through those. I like to grow my dwarf tomatoes or my bush tomatoes in my GreenStalks. And so I did 1 GreenStalk last year with bush or dwarf tomatoes in it. This upcoming season, we're doing 2. So I need to add to the variety, y'all. And so quickly, I will go through the Tomato Fest. And Tomato Fest, they're part of the Dwarf Tomato Project. And so go to their website, check them out, tomatofest.com. There is a link below on how to get to their website. But we will be doing, and their packaging doesn't have pictures, but I have pictures right here for you. So we're going to do the Dwarf Golden Gypsy. I've never grown that one before. That one's a new one for me. And I just wanted to mix it up. I have red tomatoes, I have yellow tomatoes, and I have white tomatoes, and I just wanted to mix it up, striped and stratified tomatoes. So the Golden Gypsy, we'll do that one. The Sweet Scarlet Dwarf, here's a picture of that one. And I did grow this one this past season, and it did well. Actually, most of my dwarf tomatoes did well. I just didn't mark them very well in my containers. But I did grow them, and they produced amazing for me in my GreenStalks as well as my neighbors' raised beds. So, and they stayed short, guys. I mean, they stayed 2 to 3 feet tall, and they were amazing. Uluru, I don't know, y'all. I'm going to put the spelling up here as well. Uluru or something like that. Here's the picture as well for this particular tomato. Is a dwarf tomato as well. We're going to add that to the collection for this upcoming year. Now the next one is Dwarf Wow Spud Leaf. So it's a potato leaf tomato. Ooh, say that real fast. And this one did really well. The plants had really thick stems on them. The fruit was well shaped. And they came in really well, so we will be doing that one again. The Tasmanian chocolate dwarf tomato. That's the next one. Tasmanian chocolate dwarf. Grew it this past season and it put a lot of fruit on. They were kind of small and some of them were shaped kind of funny. They tasted fine though. So we're going to give them another try and just see, was it me or was it the seeds? Chocolate Lightning is another one that I grew this past season, and it had kind of the same effect as the Tasmanian chocolate, where the plants were healthy, they looked really good. The tomatoes had weird shapes, but they were a decent size, so we're going to give it another try. I don't like to count my tomatoes out the first time that I grow them, so we're going to give that one another try. Rosetta Purple. So a tomato that has a little purplish or deeper color tint on the shoulders. Grew it this past season. It did well. The plants were healthy. Y'all, I'm still on the Tomato Fest. All of these are Tomato Fest. Guys, folks, you really should check out Tomato Fest website now. I'm not getting paid anything. I'm not an affiliate, but I do like their seeds. Brandy Fred. So Brandy Fred is the next one that we will be doing. And it grew great for me this past season. Having GreenStalks full of dwarf tomatoes freed up so much additional space in my garden when I'm growing over 100 tomato plants in all. Let me see what's next. Rosella Crimson. So we talked about a Rosella Purple. Now this is Rosella Crimson. Same variety, I believe, strain or whatever you want to call it, just slightly different in color. The Dwarf Purple Heart is the next Tomato Fest seed. And this tomato for me, it was like an ox heart shape, but it was on the smaller side compared to the big ox heart that you can grow from a paste tomato standpoint. But it was a little smaller than those, but it grew very well for me. Dwarf Beauty King is the next one. Now this one, I didn't grow this one in my GreenStalk, I don't believe, but I definitely grew it in my neighbor's raised bed gardens. And it put on some huge fruit for me. And they were amazing. They taste delicious. Beauty King, that's the name of this one. Now this is the one that didn't do well for me at all. The New Big Dwarf. New Big Dwarf, here's a picture of it. I was expecting those really big, beefsteak slicing type tomatoes, but it didn't do very well for me in my garden this past year, but I'm going to try it again. And we're going to put more of them in the raised bed versus the GreenStalk to see how it does in the raised bed. Dwarf Hannah Prize. Here's the Dwarf Hannah Prize. Grew it last year and it actually surprised me. I didn't really want to grow this one. I just had some extra cells, so I threw the seeds in. And it did really well. The fruit was shaped very well and it had a good taste. Tasty Wine is another one. Tasty Wine was a medium-sized fruit. The taste was good. Production was just so-so, but we're going to grow it again because I want all dwarf tomatoes in those towers. That was all of the Tomato Fest dwarf tomatoes. Now some of the other, what I call container or bush type tomatoes that I will be growing includes the Bush Steak Hybrid. It's from Burpee's. It did amazing. The plants were healthy. They were, every year I've been growing this tomato, I'm gonna be honest with you, for at least 3 or 4 years. I will continue to grow this as one of my bush tomatoes. The plants stayed between 2 and 3 feet tall, big, heavy fruit. The fruit had a nice shape. They had a good taste. Nothing to complain about the Burpee's Bush Steak Hybrid. The Italian Roma, and I got this from Botanical Interest. Botanical Interest. And it is a Bush Roma tomato. And I won't be growing that one this year. Not because it didn't grow well. It grew very well. But I am more interested in larger tomatoes. And this Italian Roma is a much smaller Roma tomato. And I have a different variety of Roma tomatoes that I like to grow. So we won't be growing this one this year. But the Italian Roma, the bush Roma, is a great tomato, especially if you really need a bush style tomato. So I'm leaving it out here just to let you know it's a good tomato. I just have other plans for this upcoming season. The next two are from MIGardener, and one is the Geranium Kiss. It's a good container tomato, and it's a determinate tomato, so it's going to put most of the fruit on at one time. And it did okay, and honestly, it held on longer than anything else, and I had it on my patio. It's more of a salad or a small tomato, which I don't grow a lot of those, but this will be the one that I grow for this upcoming season in one of my patio towers. So it won't be in my GreenStalk that's all tomatoes. It'll be the onesie twosies here or there that I place throughout the garden. And the last bush or dwarf tomato that I'll be growing, and I can't pronounce it. I'm going to just put it up here so you can see it. Now this tomato, it did really, really well, and it was on a very short plant, only about 2 feet tall. It's an orange yellowish color, small to medium in size. It did have some cracking on it, and even in this picture here, you can see there's a little cracking on it. Had a great taste, and I like variety, so we're going to grow it again this upcoming year. That's all of my bush and dwarf tomatoes. And so everything else that I'm going to talk about is a vining tomato. It's an indeterminate vining tomato, which means it's going to start growing and it's going to keep going and going and going as long as the season is good and as long as you have good trellising for it. And you will definitely need trellising for all of the tomatoes that I'm going to talk about next. Let's start with what I call grape tomatoes or cherry tomatoes. Depending on who you are, you might call them one thing, you might call them another, but let's talk about some of those. So Sakura, I guess I'm saying that right. I got this from Johnny's, right? Yep, I got this from Johnny's. Here's a picture of Sakura, and it's a good tomato. I have nothing against it. I'm just growing so many different tomatoes that I probably will not grow that one this upcoming season. Now, I tried not to grow it this past season, but it volunteered in the garden. And guess what, y'all? We moved that volunteer to a spot. We gave it a home, and we harvested some Sakura tomatoes this past season. But a good tomato. It's a grape type tomato. The vine stayed fairly small on the Sakura, so it's I have nothing against it. It's a good tomato. You might want that one. Velvet Red. Now this one, y'all, this is the most beautiful tomato, and I got these from Seed Saver Exchange. And I didn't plant them this past season, but I had about 10 of them that volunteered. And so we found homes for a couple of those volunteers. This red velvet tomato has this frosting over it, over the leaves as well as the tomato. And it's a grape or cherry style tomato. And so I knew exactly what it was when it volunteered because it's the only tomato in my garden that has a white fuzz on the outside of it. So the red velvet, I probably won't grow it just because I prefer big tomatoes. I don't like to grow a lot of grape cherry style tomatoes, but if they volunteer, y'all, I'm going to keep them. So if you're interested in red, velvet red, it's a beautiful tomato. Give it a try. I also grew Grandpa's Minnesota. Now, Grandpa Minnesota was a Tomato Fest seed that I got free last year. And it's a cherry tomato. It's not part of the dwarf tomato project. So Tomato Fest has regular tomatoes as well. So you don't have to just get dwarf tomatoes. You can get regular tomatoes from them as well. And so they gave me this one as a free gift. And I went ahead and planted. I had one of my Grandpa Minnesota plants in my garden this past year. It gave me cherry tomatoes. Nothing to write home about. They produced, they did well. They came in clusters. It's a good cherry tomato if you want to give it a try. I will not be growing that one this upcoming season. I also had some seeds from a seed share, Super Sweet 100. And I think everybody knows about Super Sweet 100. It gives you these long trellis of red grape tomatoes that are super sweet, just like the name says. And so I grew one of these in the garden this past season. And this is from a seed share, so I didn't even have to pay for it. I got these free, y'all. I like free. And so I will be growing Super Sweet 100 as one of the few varieties I will be growing for my grape and cherry tomatoes. Cherry and grape tomatoes, y'all, they take over the garden. You can't get rid of them. They start coming in and they don't stop. They self-seed all over the place. They volunteer all over the place. So I'll only plant maybe 5 or 6 plants, but I end up with like 10 or 15 by the end of the season. So don't let my 1 or 2 fool you. There will be plenty in my garden this upcoming year. I'll also be growing the black cherry. Now, I got my black cherry from the Rusted Garden. It's a good tomato, deliciously sweet tomato. And if you let these black cherries, and here's the picture, ripen on the vine, the skins are not as tough. They're in my mind, a thinner skinned tomato, but you have to let them ripen all the way on the vine. It's one of the most well talked about cherry tomatoes out there, at least for the home gardener, and I will be growing that one again. Sun Gold, which is another one of my tomatoes from botanical interest. Sun Gold is the sweetest tomato out there, y'all. It's like the Super Sweet 100. The only difference is that it's orange, and it will self-seed all over your garden, and it will crack. So if you get too much water at one time, these will crack on you in a minute. They will split wide open. But when the temperature is right and the watering is right, these are an excellent tomato. But if they split and crack on you, don't worry, because they come in so fast, you blink and then you're going to have a whole new set of tomatoes anyway. I also grew champagne bubbles this past season. And champagne bubbles, it did really well. When I first started harvesting it, the skin was a little thick. I wasn't so crazy about it. And then I realized I was picking them too early. I wasn't sure of what color they were supposed to look like. And so when I left them on the vines longer, they had an amazing taste and an amazing color. We will grow this one again. And the last one, which is my favorite, is the black strawberry. And here's a good picture of this black strawberry. And it was so beautiful. I just love to watch this thing grow and to see the striations in it from the reds and the purples and just how it all blends together. Black strawberry is a winner, it's a keeper. We will grow it again for year number 3 for me. And that's it for my grape and cherry tomatoes. I'm going to keep moving on because we got a lot of tomatoes to go through, y'all. So we're going to move on to what I call paste tomatoes. Paste tomatoes are great for sauces, right? You don't have to cook them down for hours and hours to get that good thick sauce that you're looking for. And this year I will be growing an ox heart. Remember I told you Tomato Fest has other tomatoes? So they have an ox heart, and here's a picture of it. So we will grow that, and I like the shape of the ox heart paste tomatoes. They're very meaty. So we're going to give that one a try. Italian heirloom. Now, I've grown Italian heirloom 2 years ago. It grew amazing. This past season, I grew it. They didn't do so well. I don't know if my seeds were getting too old or what. They didn't do so well. So I ordered some from Tomato Fest, and it's supposedly the same tomato, and we're going to give it a try again. The Italian heirloom is a huge paste tomato, and it's supposed to be great in Italian cooking. It's great in all my cooking when it produces. We're going to also do the Korean long, and here's a picture of the Korean long. And I got these seeds from Baker's Creek, and it's more of a horn shape tomato. And I've never grown it before, but like, why not? It's meaty. It has a very small seed cell inside the tomato, and it's going to be perfect for my sauces. And I like to make a lot of different sauces and things. And I didn't make ketchup this past year, but I do plan on making it this upcoming year. And you have to really, really cook those down. So the more meaty the tomato, the less you're going to have to cook it. So the Korean long. The next one is the opalka, which is also that kind of long-horned shaped type tomato. And it's an indeterminate, which all of these are, right? And I didn't grow it last year, but I'm growing this one to replace two that I grew that I wasn't crazy about. So this will be the first season that we're trying the opalka. The pink ox heart. So I told you I like the ox heart. So I got the one from Tomato Fest, and I also have one from MIGardener. This pink ox heart tomato did really well in the garden, but it was on the smaller side, and I really wanted a larger ox heart tomato. But we're going to grow it again. We will also be growing Burpee's Big Mama. Now, y'all, the Big Mama has produced so well in my garden for almost 5 years at this point in time. It is my absolutely favorite paste tomato. These are some of the biggest Roma-shaped tomatoes I have ever seen. And this is why I will not be growing the Italian Roma bush tomato, because of this one. I love this tomato, y'all, and it gets big. I'm not playing. This is the tomato to grow. And it's 8 to 10 ounces. Y'all, that's a huge paste tomato. And it's amazing. It's my favorite paste tomato. And that's it for this year in paste tomatoes. That's not it for paste tomatoes. The two that I will not be growing are the Fertile and a Gibberty. Fertile and Gibberty. I grew both of these this past season. The plants grew, but they didn't look so great. They were not the healthiest plants. The fruit was okay. It wasn't great. So we're going to change these out for the opalka in place of these two, and the Korean long. So we're going to have Korean long and opalka to replace these two. Now we're going to move over to the beefsteak tomatoes. For the beefsteak tomatoes, y'all, these are the big ones. These are the big boys. These are the ones I love. And we're going to start with Delicious. And so I've always got Delicious, and here's the picture of it, from Burpee's. But while I was on Tomatoes Fest website, I saw they had it. I didn't purchase it because I knew I had it from Burpee's. But y'all, they sent me some free Delicious seeds. So we will grow Delicious in both brands. And it's a huge, I mean, these tomatoes are like the size of the palm of your hand. You only need one slice for a tomato sandwich. So we'll be doing Delicious. We will not be doing the watermelon beefsteak. It grew, it produced, but it was not a big tomato for me. It did not do well for me at all. I mean, it produced though, don't get me wrong, it produced, but they were small. And if I'm growing a beefsteak, I want a beefsteak. I want it the size of my hand. So we will not be doing watermelon beefsteak, but we will be doing bodacious. Y'all look at bodacious. Now I'm showing this up here. If the picture's not coming in, I'll post the picture in the corner here. Bodacious, look how big these tomatoes are. They are the size of your hand and then some. Bodacious is a keeper. It's a winner. It's from Burpee's. I'll be growing that again this year, next year, and the following years. Burpee's also has something called a steak sandwich. So one's supposed to be the size of a sandwich. And it did really well for me this year. We will grow it again. It's from Burpee's Steak Sandwich. Now, Burpee's has the most beefsteak tomatoes, y'all. They also have something called Steakhouse. And here's a picture of Steakhouse. And it's delicious. It was big. It was huge. And the thing I liked about all of these Burpee's beefsteak tomatoes, they all came in at varying times of the season. So it really extended the harvest. For a minute, I thought they weren't going to come in at all. But then toward the end of the season, they started popping in here and there, huge tomatoes coming in. So they are definitely a keeper. And then Super Steak is Burpee's other beefsteak tomato. And it did well in the garden also. And so Burpee's will be one of my primary companies when it comes to the beefsteak tomatoes. Now, I did grow the Kozy, hopefully you can see it, this past season. It was okay. It was just an average sized tomato. I probably will not grow it again this upcoming season because I have a couple new things that I want to try, and I probably won't have room in the garden. But it is a beautiful tomato. It's got the little rib shoulders, and I mean, it was a good tomato. I just probably won't grow it because of just space in the garden. Now, there are a few more tomatoes that they're not beefsteaks, but they're larger tomatoes that I do want to talk a little bit about before I move into what I call my specialty tomatoes. So the Thornbird's Terracotta, it was a free seed for me. It was a decent tomato. It was a medium to a large size tomato. It had a deeper orange, just almost like a smoky orange color to it. It did well in the garden. I only had one plant, but I don't have room for it this upcoming season. So we won't be doing Thornbird's Terracotta. But if you're interested in it, Baker's Creek has those. The Giant Crimson. Now, MIGardener brought Giant Crimson back. It was pretty much gone. You couldn't find it anywhere. I planted it several places throughout my garden, and they did okay. The fruits were, I think, a little small, and I like the big ones. It had a great taste. So I probably won't grow it this upcoming season just because I don't have a lot of room, and I'm looking for either huge, big slicers, or I'm looking for more of a paste-style tomato. Abe Lincoln is another one that was just, in my mind, a standard slicing tomato, Abe Lincoln. Again, it did okay. I probably won't grow it just because I have so many other things that I will be growing. It had a beautiful shape. There wasn't a lot of cracking on it. It was a medium-sized tomato. Good slicer. Nothing to complain about. Seeger, which is it's more of a salad style tomato. It's small. I have to say small, bigger than a cherry tomato, but not quite a slicer. The Seeger I got from Fruition Seeds, and I grew, I think, one plant, and the Seeger plant stayed kind of small. The fruits are only 4 ounces, so that's a little small for me. I don't plan on growing this upcoming season. The fruits were well shaped, nice and round, tender. Nothing to complain about, just probably won't grow it this upcoming year, but it may be perfect for you. And the last one is Brandy Wise. Now, I got that from Fruition Seeds as well. Brandy Wise, supposed to be good for late and early blight. It's supposed to be excellent to grow in my part of the country, which is Southwest Ohio, because of its blight resistance. And it was supposed to be a huge tomato. But I've tried for 2 seasons now, and I just haven't been able to produce this tomato the way I want. So we will not be growing the Brandy Wise this year. It did have an amazing taste. It reminded me of a brandy wine tomato, but the production just wasn't there, and I don't want to waste the space in my garden. From here, we will move into the specialty tomatoes.
For my specialty tomatoes, I am going to start with what I call my yellow or my orange type tomatoes. And they can be orange, they can be yellow, they can be a striped yellow and orange, they can be striated, they could be striped, right? That's what I call one of my specialty type tomatoes. And so I'm going to categorize all of my orange and yellow tomatoes into one group, and we will go through those next. For these tomatoes, for this group of tomatoes, I have a Dr. Wychees, and I will grow it every year. I tried to grow it 2 years ago. I planted it too late because the seeds came in late, but they did amazing in the garden this year. They taste delicious. They have a sweetness to it, but it's well balanced. The shape is pretty good too. And it didn't have a lot of cracking. So just in general, a very, very good, productive tomato to enjoy. And I will be growing it every year. Another tomato that kind of fits right into this category, and these next three are very similar to one another, but we're going to grow all three of them again. Well, two of these three I've grown before, one will be new. We will be growing the Kellogg's Breakfast. It's also a yellowish tomato. And I don't think it has much orange or red in it at all. It grew very, very well for me this year. Big yellow, huge tomatoes, almost the size of my hand, and they were delicious. I mean, it says here 1 to 2 pound fruits, and that feels about right based on what I saw this year. Pineapple is the other tomato that we'll be growing, and this pineapple tomato, y'all, it puts me in mind of the Kellogg's Breakfast, and as well as a big rainbow, which we'll talk about next. So actually, let's just do that. I have the pineapple and I have the big rainbow, and I grew both of these this year, and they both came out really, really well. Both of them can get up to 2 pounds. One is an 80-day, one is a 90-day, and just to be honest with you, on the vine, I couldn't tell one from the other of these two tomatoes. And the difference in these and the Dr. Wychees was that they do crack just a little bit, just right around the top, around the shoulders. But other than that, they did amazing. The taste was good. They're sweeter in taste. And I find most of the orange and yellow tomatoes to have a little more sweetness to them than that traditional tomato flavor. They're more fruity in flavor, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. But these two are keepers. We will be growing both the big rainbow and the pineapple again this upcoming season. Now, the new one to the party, the very new one to the party is called a hillbilly tomato. And I like big tomatoes. I keep talking about how I really, really like big tomatoes. This hillbilly tomato can get up to 3 pounds. Up to 3 pounds, y'all. Y'all, I like them big. I like my tomatoes big. And up to 3 pounds. It's out of West Virginia. And I've never had it before. I've seen some other people grow it on YouTube before, and they just looked really good. And it puts me in mind, again, of the pineapple and the big rainbow. But the striations in it aren't as pronounced. So if you can look there at the little reds and stuff in there, they're not as pronounced. They're more blended. The taste of this is supposed to be a very rich, sweet, fruity taste. So I put it in the same category with the rest of these orange and yellow tomatoes. They're mostly orange and reddish striped tomatoes, for me anyway. And then we will be growing, or excuse me, we will not be growing, but I wanted to share it with you. I've grown it before, and it's called the orange accordion. And I grew it before, and it does grow massive tomatoes. I mean, they're massive. They're orange, they're big, they look kind of like a mushroom. But y'all, when I cut it open, it was nothing inside. I mean, there was just nothing inside. They were more hollow than anything. So, I mean, is it pretty to grow? Yes, it was very pretty to grow. But it wasn't the type tomato I need to stock my pantries for a year's supply of tomatoes and tomato products. So if you're interested in growing it just to look at the beauty, it's a good tomato. But I would think twice if you're thinking about getting a tomato that has a lot of flesh inside. Summer Sweet Gold. Here's a picture of it here. And it's indeterminate. It's another big slicing tomato, but it's yellow. So I'm putting it in the same family of the ones that we've been talking about. Never grown it before, but it's supposed to be able to get up to about 2 pounds as well. So we'll definitely try that one this upcoming season. You see all these new tomatoes? You see why I had to put some of them aside? And then for the first time ever at Kim's Kozy Korner, we are going to grow a white tomato. It's called the Great White. Here's a picture of it here. It's from Tomato Fest. And I've seen other people grow white tomatoes and I'm like, oh, they look so good in the garden. And so we're going to grow them this year. I'm saving space so I can play. This is the one I'm going to play with. I'll put it that way. I'm going to play with it. Hopefully it has a great taste. I don't know. I've never had it, but it's supposed to be a nice size slicing tomato. And that's all of the specialty yellow and orange family and white tomatoes that I have. And then we get to those deep, dark specialty tomatoes. And so for those really dark tomatoes, I'll be growing the True Brandywine. What is it called? True Black Brandywine. And so it's a brandywine, but it's a deep, deep, dark black color. And I grew that one this year. And the shoulders get really, really dark. And the underside has a little bit of red to it. It had a delicious traditional tomato taste. It had very little cracking that I can recall. The tomatoes came in about medium size, though. They weren't huge tomatoes. They were about medium size. Toward the end of the season, they got to be very small. But, I mean, it was October. I mean, what do you expect for October and November? So we'll be growing that one again. We'll be growing Cherokee Purple. This is an old faithful at this point, and it's a favorite of mine. I love the taste. It's got more of that purplish hue to it versus a black hue. Cherokee Purple, an awesome, amazing, it was a good producer as well. I mean, as I think about it, it produced very well. There were lots of sets on there. Great flavor, not a lot of cracking. It did really, really well in the garden. So we'll be doing that one again. I then have something called a Black Beauty. Now, I've bought Black Beauty. I've been growing it now, what, 2 years? 2 years I've been growing the Black Beauty. And this season, it did okay, but the tomatoes were small. They were really small. And I was looking for a bigger tomato, but we're going to grow it again. And I have 2 different companies that are selling the Black Beauty tomatoes. So I got Baker Creek and I have Fruition Seeds. And so I'll grow a few of each because I don't know which one's going to come out better than the other, if one set of seeds are older than the other. So we will definitely grow the Black Beauty again and hopefully get a better harvest this upcoming season off of that one. Where the Black Beauty failed, the Black Brandywine picked up the difference. So we had an excellent dark tomato harvest this past season. So no losses here, no losses whatsoever. And then I picked up some three new types of what I call those super dark tomatoes. One of them is the Black Crim, and I've grown it before. I just haven't grown it for a few years. The fruit is about a medium size. It's about 8 ounces. It's a smaller fruit with some pretty good clusters, if I remember correctly. It did well in the past. We just didn't grow it this past season, so we're bringing it back. So I'm saying it's new. It'll be new in my garden to you on YouTube because I didn't grow it this past year. We will also be growing, y'all, this is interesting. This is very interesting. I didn't notice this until just now. Interesting. I'm also going to be growing a black from Tula tomato, black from Tula. And the interesting thing about this tomato, it says that it can get up to 16 ounces, so up to a pound is what it says. It's an indeterminate. They're both indeterminate. The interesting thing is, it's the same picture, y'all. Look at that. It's the exact same picture on both of those packs. Whether I'm talking about a black Krim or if I'm talking about a black from Tula, it's the same picture. The black from Tula is 16 ounces. The black Krim is 8 ounces. What's different about them? Let's see here. They're both a deep burgundy color. In a warmer climate, this can have a smoky flavor. I don't see any difference in the two of them. Don't see a difference. We will see. We will grow both of them and see how similar they really are. I'm also going to grow, and I'm putting this one with my dark tomatoes, but I could put it with my beefsteaks, but we'll be growing this true beefsteak, or it's got another name, Fiji improved. But I put it with my darker tomatoes because if you look at the shoulders up here, it's got a darker hue to it. So I put it with my darker tomatoes. I could have put it with the beefsteaks. It can be 4 or 5 inches in diameter. 4 or 5 inches in diameter. That's a big tomato, y'all. But it says it has a purplish, brownish flesh. So it's got that deeper color to it. So that's why I'm putting it with my darker purple and black tomatoes. And so we will grow this one this year. It's another new one that we haven't tried before, and we are going to grow it and we are going to enjoy it. And then this past season, I grew the Paul Robeson. I got it from Fruition Seeds, Paul Robeson, and it didn't grow well, y'all. It didn't grow well at all. And again, this is a deeper red tomato with some dark hues on the shoulders. The reason it didn't grow well had nothing, I believe, to do with the seeds. It had to do with the location where I put them in the garden. So they got shaded out pretty quickly by, believe it or not, my cantaloupes. My cantaloupes took over that bed and it shaded out these tomatoes. And so they didn't have a chance. But I'm not mad because I had cantaloupes for the first time ever in my garden. So we're going to grow them again, but we're going to give them a better location in the garden. Paul Robeson, I hear, is one of the best tasting tomatoes out there. I don't know because I didn't get to really enjoy any of mine because of location. So we will grow Paul Robeson again. And the last category, and I know we've been talking for a while, y'all, but I love my tomatoes. And if you're like me, there are hundreds of varieties out there and you're not sure which one to even try. So I'm hoping me letting you know about my experiences will help you in choosing the different varieties for your garden this upcoming year. But I have one more category that I want to talk about. And honestly, I don't even think they're really tomatoes, but I'm putting them in the tomato category, and they're called ground cherries. And so I've never grown ground cherries before. I've seen them in other people's gardens. They said it's a super sweet, fruity flavor, but I've never had it. It looked good, so we're going to try it. And so I picked up 2 different varieties of ground cherries. I have Aunt Molly's. Aunt Molly's, what does it say here? It's very sweet with a hint of tartness. And then I also picked up New Hanover. So they're the 2 together. They're both from Baker Creek. The New Hanover ones just says sweet, fruity, and addictive. So we will give those a try and we will let you know how ground cherries go since I've never grown them before. Now you could say, Kim, wait, you're missing one thing. You could say, Kim, you're missing tomatillos. You didn't talk about tomatillos this year. And you know what? You're right. I didn't talk about tomatillos. So let's quickly talk about tomatillos. So tomatillos actually is not a tomato, but they have a husk on it very similar to the cherry tomatoes. The tomatillos have a husk on them as well. Here's a picture of one of the tomatillos. Now this one right here is called Grande Rio Verde Tomatillo. It gets pretty large. And then I also had another one. What is this other variety? Tamayo or hybrid. And I don't have a picture of this one. And I use tomatillos to make my salsa verde, which is a green salsa. It's got a little tanginess, a little sweetness, and is delicious. But since my daughter moved away, I'm the only person that eats it. I probably got a 5-year supply. I grew so many tomatillos this past year. There's no reason for me to grow them again for a very, 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 very long time. So if you're interested in making green salsa or salsa verde, and you want to do it with actual tomatillos versus green tomatoes, these tomatillos are two great varieties, Grande Rio Verde Tomatillo and the Tamayo are hybrid. This one's from Gurney's and the other one is from MIGardener. They both did very well, but you have to grow more than one plant if you're growing tomatillos. Just so you know, you have to grow more than one plant for them to be pollinated. So I'm not growing them this year, but you don't want to forget about those if you want some of that green salsa. That's it. That's all of the tomatoes. Now I got more down there, y'all. That's not all of them. That's probably 90% of the different tomato plants that I have. So you know which ones I like? You know which ones I'm trying new this year and I don't have a lot of information on, as well as the ones that did okay, but we're just not going to grow them this upcoming season. And so get your tomato seeds early. If you want a variety of tomatoes growing in your garden space, I recommend you going to those websites now that we're in the new year and picking your seeds up early before those very limited quantities, especially those specialty ones, are all gone and they're out of stock. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and I will do videos like this for all the different vegetables that I'll be growing this year to help you in your selection of seeds for this upcoming season. Until next time, and I hope there will be a next time, that you'll come back and visit me at Kim's Cozy Corner. Bye.